Do you remember the Nirbhaya rape case of 2012? If you do, you would also remember the massive uproar and protests that followed. The protests themselves were followed by sweeping changes in India's criminal laws. Yet, it took over 7 years to bring the convicted criminals to justice. Law and order situation hasn't improved despite radical changes in the criminal laws and a clear attempt to create a deterrent effect in society. So what is the issue with our criminal justice system? Well, the answer is simple. There have been a plethora of criminal law amendments, but no real attempt to improve the body that puts the criminal law into motion. That is the police system. Police forces continue to serve as private militias of the political VVIPs, and the protection of ordinary citizens often takes the backseat. However, this is going to change soon, with Union Home Minister Amit Shah himself addressing the issue. Hi and welcome. You watching TFI English, the national socio-political analysis arm of the TFI Media Group. I'm your host Atul Mishra, and in this video, I will tell you why it is important to mend the decades-old Indian police system and how Amit Shah is going about it. Let's begin. Union Home Minister Amit Shah is addressing a fundamental issue: police reforms. The issue is central to the country's security situation, but since law and order is a state subject in the Indian Constitution, successive home ministers have failed to address it. Yet, Shah is looking to address the very mindset of police forces while realizing the need to change the British origin structure of Indian police forces, due to which they have been reduced to private militias of state governments. Speaking at the 51st Foundation Day celebrations of the Bureau of Police Research and Development, that is BPRD, Shah said that the center received suggestions from various states, UTs, central forces and NGOs on the reform of the Indian Penal Code, the Indian Evidence Act and the Code of Criminal Procedure. More importantly, 14 states, 3 union territories, 8 central police organizations, 6 central armed police forces, that is the CAPF, and 7 NGOs have suggested changes in the British-era laws in the forces. Now, it is probably for the first time that the subject of police reforms as a prerequisite to the overhaul of the criminal justice system is being addressed at the top levels. The traditional practice has been to make radical changes in the penal and procedural law without reforming the primary enforcement agency of criminal laws, that is the police force. If you are a movie buff, you probably feel that the central duty of the police forces is to serve the ordinary citizen and to protect people from anti-social elements. However, the Police Act 1861, which primarily deals with the powers, functions and duties of the police forces, tells a different story. If you notice the year of enactment of the Police Act 1861, you would find that the Britishers enacted the key legislation that still deals with state police forces in the aftermath of the 1857 rebellion. The British Crown had just taken over from the East India Company, and therefore it needed an institution to curb revolutionary activity and dissent. The British government often faced violent manifestations of all the hostility that was building up against its repressive policies. Therefore, the Police Act 1861 designed the police forces on the lines of private militias whose primary job was to protect the ruling elite. The police forces functioned as the private security teams of the British officers and cracked down on the Indian subjects at the slightest provocation. Police forces were formed to protect the British from the public rather than protecting the public from anti-social elements. Police forces cracked down on revolutionary activity and dissent to avert an independence movement. Britishers left India in 1947. On January 26, 1950, India became a democratic republic. However, the colonial character of the police forces remains unchanged. The Police Act 1861 remains in force, though its blatantly colonial character has been diluted with ornamental amendments and modifications. The Model Police Act, drafted by the National Police Commission 1979 to 1981, hasn't been adopted by many states either. However, the basic policy of the British-era legislation is the reason why police forces continue to be perceived as tools of oppression in the hands of political elite. This is also the reason why police forces have failed to get shaped as organizations for ensuring peace and security and ensuring a dignified life for individual citizens. The Britishers used the police forces for for cracking down on revolutionaries. The ruling political elite now use it for harassing its opponent leaders and activists, or for curbing public demonstrations through undemocratic lathi charges and other forms of brutality. The Police Act 1861 is the parent legislation relating to the police forces. Despite drafting numerous police manuals and training protocols, at the end of the day, the functioning and hierarchy of police forces continue to get governed by the Police Act 1861. The mindset problems of unruly behavior or lack of responsiveness emanate out of the British origin laws and traditions, which design police forces as the handmaid of the political elite and not the protector of the citizens. The colonial origin of police forces is the core issue, but there are other problems too. Lack of independence of the police forces and excessive control on transfer and promotion by the state home ministries effectively compels the police personnel to give in to the wishes of their political bosses, along with a serious lack of effort to improve integrity in the police forces. Practically speaking, it is difficult to ensure integrity amongst police personnel unless they are paid well enough to afford a reasonably comfortable lifestyle. Even otherwise also, it is not prudent to treat a police officer at par with other government officers, and they ought to be given special allowances. Finally, there is a lack of resources in terms of infrastructure and human resources. This issue goes beyond the recruitment of police personnel. The biggest bottleneck in access to timely justice is the lack of strict separation between police officers who serve as general law and duty officers and those who function as investigation officers. When the same man is deployed on both law and order duties and investigation of criminal offences, he fails to properly discharge either of the duties. This is the reason why an ordinary citizen doesn't feel safe on the streets, and filing charge sheets or closure reports gets unduly delayed. Finally, India has a Union Home Minister who is ready to improve the country's decades-old police system. Law and order will remain a state subject, but once mindset changes are institutionalized in the police forces, their colonial character would be replaced by a responsive, accountable, and democratic structure.